So the showers are here, the rains are here as predicted by weather experts. And so the conversation has been, how can we be able to harness that rain, especially now that we've been we're coming out from a long dry spell, but what can you do to ensure that it's practical for you and your homestead? That's the conversation that we'll be having here. This is a conversation that will apply to you in the urban centers and to you in the rural centers as well. So let's listen in and take notes if we can. So in studios we are joined by Mr. James Chiseka. He is the team leader East Africa at Aid Environment. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. David.
Mr. Chiseka, the rains are finally here. As predicted, though they took some time.
Really, yeah.
What explains this long delay? Because it's gone 2-3 months and we have been waiting for the rains, nowhere to be seen.
Well, there's many things we like to blame. Usually we say climate change. I usually say climate change is an excuse for poor management, but that could be a story for another day. Basically, back in the day we had forests, we had a lot of trees generally, but all that is reduced.
Okay.
Now trees, they contribute to making of rain, of course. So if trees are gone, we can expect such delays, to put it quite simply.
There's been a change in pattern of the seasons. We all remember the rain used to come in December, and the beginning of the year we used to start the year with some bits of rain. Now it has switched to, we're going into the 4th month of the year. Is that the same explanation you would give for that?
Yes. Well, usually we would have 2 rainy seasons in the central, one starting around March to May and the other one around September to December, as you say. But things are changing because we've also changed our ways. We've also changed our behaviors and how we manage the environment, basically. That has a lot to do with, it contributes to the changes in the patterns of rainfall and of weather.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Uganda, as a country, we are an ideal location for rainwater harvesting. 80% of 80 inches of rainfall a year. So now that the rainy seasons are here, we need to plan better, because when the rainy seasons come around, we have to plan for that dry spell that could be even longer, because now the rain is unpredictable. The patterns are longer than they used to be. They have changed. So how do we get started?
Well, the thing is, what we're going to see, usually we will see a lot of floods to start with in the city. We will see, if you look at the roads, there's roadside drains, they'll become like small rivers. We'll see, if you live in the rural areas, we'll see deep gullies, so a lot of water eroding soils. But we'll also see some wetlands, they become live again. We see marshes and plants, they blossom, and that is good. But shortly after, we will see that the water reduces, streams dry up, marshes dry up, and of course crops, they start to die. Now, even within the rainy season, we see there is a moment, could be a few days or weeks, when there isn't rain. Now, to a farmer, that could mean that your crops will die, because if there is no water, no rain at the critical growing moments, then there is no harvest to have. Now, basically, what rainwater harvesting is about, it's about bridging the gap between the moments you have a lot of water, a lot of rainfall, and the moment when you don't have rainfall discussed.
Let's talk about the solutions that are there, and I'd like us to break it down to accessible equipment that them in the rural areas can get and us in the urban areas can get with regards to water harvesting. Where do we start? What gadgets are we looking at?
Right. There is different ways to harvest water, and usually when we talk about rainwater harvesting, the first thing that comes to people's mind is water from the roof harvested in a container or a tank. The tank could be plastic or metallic. I mean, they come in different sizes and shapes, but that is just a bit of it. You can get water from courtyards, the compound. You can get water from roads. You imagine a road, lots of kilometers of road. You can get water from it. You can get water from rivers, sandy rivers, depending on where you are. And to answer your question, it depends the purpose. It depends where you are, and yeah, it depends which resources you have. If you live in an area that has the iron sheet roofs, so the hard roof, you could get water from it, from a tank, and these could be the prices vary, of course. But there are areas where there are very few hard roofs. Talk of the north of the country. Those areas, they have very few alternatives, options for water. But what we see, often you find very big rock outcrops. It's a big rock that is sticking out of the ground. So think of that as a big house from which you can harvest water, you know, and of course the approach to that could be different.
Okay, for example, like you said, in the rural areas, most of the roofs are actually either grass thatched, but now we are seeing people moving towards iron sheets. So if my house has iron sheets, but I don't have money to buy the modern gutters,
Right.
can I improvise?
Yes, you could.
Tell us more.
Back in the day when I was growing up, my mother, she would get the skin or the outer skin of a banana plant.
Yes.
And that worked really fine.
Yes.
That worked quite fine. Now, if you live in areas where there is bamboo, I hope you know bamboo.
Yes.
So you could split it in half, and
use that.
could give you a gutter. You know, it really depends. You could always improvise. There are also moments or places where you see people they fold iron sheet. And they're making gutters. What you need, it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be complex or fancy. You need a tool that will direct the water to a reservoir or a container or a tank, whatever.
Okay.
So there is different ways you can do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Over and above having gutters, what is the other quick solution for someone in the rural areas to harvest rainwater?
So the gutter is one thing. You need a reservoir, you need a storage facility for that water. And it could be the small basins. This is the very basic step. But then you have the tanks that I mentioned come in different sizes. And as you rightly mentioned, this can be quite expensive. This can be quite expensive sometimes. But one of the things we are doing at Aid Environment or Rain Foundation is to find ways in which to make it possible for the rural communities to access these tanks. So we have done a project in Rwengo district at the start, where the tanks are provided on credit. So we will build the tank. The tank is built by our experts, and you would pay in installments over time. Now, the purpose for which we are implementing that project is to show that you could actually harvest water, sell it, make a business out of it, and using the money you make or the money you save because you're not buying water, you could pay back to the services that we deliver to you. So there are different ways. And I understand government has started a few years ago a project where they would provide these facilities to communities on credit.
Okay. Now, we all know that rain offers a steady and constant source of fresh water. The question I'll be wondering now is, why aren't we taking advantage of this abundant source of fresh water? Like you said, growing up, it was customary. We all knew when it rains, you're going to go a few days without going to the well,
right? Because
you would get all the basins out. People will shower in the rain just to make sure you don't have to go fetch water to shower. Every single house at least had a tank or somewhere to keep some water. Now when you look at the houses around, now that we're getting into the rainy season, the tanks are way up somewhere and they're being filled by piped water.
Right.
Why are we not taking advantage of it?
Well, it could be the cost. Some people think it is expensive, and indeed it can be, unless you save up for it. But for other people, there is different reasons why. If I think of where I stay, many people, they don't own the house. So you rent somebody else's house. Now, if you rent somebody else's house, it may not be your responsibility, you think, to install the tank. It could be the landlord's responsibility. Now, the landlord is looking at making money out of the houses. Right. Anything else that he invests in is looked at as a cost. So he would not like to do it. So they're different and that is a big reason we find in the areas where people stay in rented facilities. But in the rural areas, sometimes you've got to drive a few kilometers to get to the town. To get to the town to buy your tank, find a big enough vehicle to bring it to your house, find a clever boy or girl these days to install it for you properly, and that discourages people. That discourages people.
I think in the urban area, it's I could sort of understand because the biggest number of us are renting houses, and the landlord won't find it useful to him to put a water reservation place for you because it doesn't bother him. It's cutting your expenditure, so it doesn't it doesn't really bother him. He's safe for putting up a few tanks and you fill them with your water that you're going to pay. But moving forward, is there any way we can get away from that? Because that comes at a cost. Yes, it's not the landlord's cost, but it's my cost. Should we as tenants start demanding for some of this?
Well, demand, I'm not sure if that's a narrative the landlord would like to hear, but you could engage in a meaningful discussion with him or with her to explain to them the challenges that you face regarding access to water. If you live in, if you're fortunate enough to live in an urban area where there is a steady supply or a fairly stable supply of water in the piped grid, you may not have a reason to worry. But that is changing. There are towns or urban areas we see where you go a few days without water. So the thing is engaging in a meaningful discussion with the landlord that yes, if I have this facility, this could save me some burden, and I believe that could actually increase the market.
Mr. Chisaka, we know that the piped grid is not offering enough water. Even just here in Kampala, some regions have gone years without water, literally, months without water. So do we say then that maybe, the sustainable solution for national water, for them to just have a supplementary, source of water as well, is to put in a policy whereby all the landlords will be forced or will be mandated, to put in water harvesting, rainwater harvesting, maybe solutions in the areas to harvest this water as a supplementary of the water, restoration.
That could be one. That could be one. The other thing for us to think about, apart from supplementing national water, which is very important, I agree, is that imagine your house. The houses at the moment, they're getting increasingly paved compounds. That's a lot of water that leaves your facility. Now, a lot of that water goes to your neighbor downhill. And that neighbor, if he or she has the same compound as you, they generate a lot of water. And in the end, you have a big flood happen downstream. Now, as an urban authority, you may want to make the drainages bigger every year and bigger some more the next year. But the thing is, if you are not doing anything on reducing the generation of runoff, as an urban authority, you will fail to contain the flood, and we see that happen. Now, the narrative for the urban authority could move a bit away from bringing water and supplementing water, national water, but also to reducing flooding, for example. And with several such reasons, we then build up a strong case. One, for requiring landlords that yes, you build a house, harvest water to supplement national water, very importantly, but also to reduce flooding. Because you can imagine, for every cubic meter or for every liter of water that leaves your house, that is a liter of flooding that you contribute.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. And let's look at flood management, because whenever it rains, it floods, especially in the major, routes. Just here in Bugolobi, the roundabouts. I mean, it's crazy when it rains heavily. How can we start having that conversation on putting into place, effective drainage systems that will direct this water to maybe some, sewage water treatment where we treat this water and it's taken back to the grid, or something, just some solution to make sure that we recycle this water back again to, optimum use by the people. What would be the ideal starting point for that?
From my perspective and from our perspective at RAIN, drainages are very important, but that's not the easiest of things that you could do to avoid a flood, in our opinion. The thing is, a flood is caused by water. Arrest the water, so to speak, where it falls. Arrest the water at people's houses. Encourage that people have water harvesting facilities, that in the first place water does not leave their facility to go downhill. For us, that is the starting point. The drainages will come later, and they're much more expensive than doing the basic thing.
And so far we've failed.
Water. So far we've failed at drainages, and I would be not to be very skeptical, but I do not have. I'm not very positive that we can manage via building drainages to contain the floods. I'm not sure that we can do that.
So how do we arrest these floods and put this water into use?
Harvest it. So tanks.
Okay.
So there are.
So I'm in a compound that has flooded. How do I arrest this water?
Not in a compound that has flooded. Imagine that you live, and the thing is, you have houses on top of the hill, and progressively as you go down, status of people also reduces. The rich people, they stay on top of the house, on top of the hill. Now they are not flooding, but they are generating a lot of water that causes flooding to the down the hill. You could have a tank, a plastic one. You could have a plastic or metallic or whatever form, or you could have an underground tank that collects your water. Now we know that there are towns around the globe, and it's quite serious in India, Bangalore, that households are mandated. At the moment, it's part of the plans. They're mandated to either harvest the water in a tank or make a deep hole in the ground and direct that water so it enters the ground. It also recharges the shallow groundwater. Shallow groundwater reserves.
With all these water reservation plans, it looks like we are. Many will say, well, this water is not clean. And we are looking at safety for all of us. We want to use clean water, and that's why we choose to stay away from that kind of program. And we feel safer with the piped and piped water. So safety measures for one that is planning on taking advantage of this season that is here and reserving their water. They need to know the safety measures to make sure that they're safe with this water.
Right. If you are getting water from the roof, the basic thing before the rain season starts, clean your tank. I would have said clean the roof, but I have not seen where that has been done. So clean your tank. That is one of the things that could be done. But the other that we do now on the systems that we build and our partners build is you would have a smaller tank before the bigger tank. Now the smaller tank helps to settle the water before it gets to the bigger tank, and so all the debris of the soil stays in the smaller tank before it goes to the bigger tank. It could be a tank, but in other cases it's a simple pipe. That allows the water to settle before it flows into the bigger reservoir. Now that helps, but the thing is, usually rainwater is not as dirty as people imagine it is. In many cases, it is much cleaner than many sources of water.
Interesting.
Unless the atmosphere is polluted, and we don't live in a polluted country, for example, that is a reason to worry. But of course, that doesn't mean that you should not take measures to further reduce the risk. And that could be the smaller tank or the smaller pipe where the water settles before it gets to the bigger reservoir.
Mr. Chiseka, as we come to a close, in 1 second, what's your comment on people building dams to, store water for the dry spells? What's your take on that one?
very important sources of water for large-scale use, large-scale animal use or irrigation in areas that do not have many options.
Okay.
So the dams, you could talk of valley tanks, and I know each time you mention valley tank, people remember a certain story that you may know about.
Yes.
But those are very important sources of water
Okay.
in the dry area. So it could be dams, it could be valley tanks, it could also be ponds.
Interesting.
Yes.
Thank you so much for giving us all those options.
You're
Of course, the affordable ones and the expensive ones. So if you can afford, do what you can just for us to ensure that we don't, let this rainwater go to waste. Let's do something about it. Thank you so much to Mr. James Chiseka, Team Leader, East Africa at Aiden Environment. Thank you so much for coming in studios.
Thank you for having me.
Let's keep this conversation going. The hashtag is Morning at MTV across all the social media platforms. Before we take that short commercial break, we have some news updates for you. Now, there's heavy security deployment, around the city, especially at some of the arcades whose ownership is under contestation. Now, we do have David Ajuna on ground in one of the arcades to tell us what's happening in that area.
Yes, hello.
Good morning, David. How are you?
I'm okay. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. What can you gather for us this morning? I'm sure that you're in one of the arcades. What's exactly happening? Just paint a picture for us.
So we reached this arcade this morning at Nabukira Plaza, downtown Kampala. And of course, all we realize is that there is a heavy deployment of police, both police and the army. Serious and heavy deployment. And of course, people who are doing business from here have been locked out of their business premises. And then one thing we also come to understand is that during the night, someone came around this premise and put padlocks upon the other padlocks that have been there. Then the other thing they did was welding on the doors so that people who are doing business from within here cannot access the building. Then they also did welding on the padlocks that have been on this premise already, and then people cannot access their premises. Now the traders who are doing their business in this building are also outside here, and most of them seem to be stranded. However, the situation is still a little bit calm. There is not much activity going on in terms of protesting and things of that nature. So we realize that it is still calm. People are still maintaining their calm, but there is no business going on. The only thing that is happening here is that people cannot access their premises. There is serious deployment, and then the welding of the doors to make sure that people cannot access their premises. Now, some of them say that it is happening to people who had not paid their rent arrears for the past month. Like, this building has been having conflicts and wrangles around it. To do with ownership, people don't know who exactly they're supposed to be paying, and some of them allege that they paid out money to other owners, and then other owners come up and say that it is them that are supposed to be getting the collections. Now, such kinds of misunderstandings between the owners of these buildings is what is continuing to bring up problems in this building.
David, before we let you go, what can you tell us about this particular standoff? Are we yet to see a point whereby we're going to get to a point whereby the owners, quote unquote, seems like there are many who are claiming for this rent, the owners actually do find an amicable or a sustainable solution with the traders? Are we going to get to that point anytime soon?
I beg your pardon?
Okay, my question is, before I let you go, I know we have an issue with our connectivity, but my question is, are we soon going to get to a point whereby we find an amicable solution, a sustainable solution between the traders and this, quote-unquote, so many landlords who are claiming for rent?
See, from what I know, Mala, is that people normally come here, sit. Each time there is a protest, they tend to sit around, and whenever they do the sitting, they come up with conclusions and deductions. But before you know it, it doesn't take long before you get back here and you find people in protest, you find people locked up, And you know, it is something that is becoming continuous. The other day you were here and they look like they are going to find a solution to it. The tycoons come, they meet the tenants of these buildings, and then when that happens, you may think there is peace going to come up or sanity, but then before you know it, there is conflict emerging again. Because I remember not so long ago that we had stories about this kind of deployment, and these people start with some leaders from the government and city council leaders, and they seem to have